Are you like most sales and other professionals who want to grow their wealth faster than what they are currently doing through their company 401k, even with that company match, the stock market, or just plain saving money? Would you sleep better at night if you had the financial freedom to be job optional in just 3 to 5 years through investing in real assets? Maybe you don't want to stop working, but wouldn't it be cool if you could retire a decade earlier than most? And do the traveling you and your family have planned for years while you're still young and can enjoy it? Let's face it, most busy professionals don't have the time or desire to take on more work outside of their W-2 to grow their wealth. On The Wealth Flow, each week we share the stories, the investments, and take a deep dive into the various asset classes that can deliver that accelerated growth to your portfolio passively. That's right. No extra work for you. Instead, we'll put your money to work. Learn what the 95% aren't talking about and join the top 5% of earners today on The Wealth Flow.
All right, welcome to The Wealth Flow. My guest today is Christian LeFer. He is the founder and CEO of Instant Nonprofit, a company that focuses on fast, easy, and affordable to start and grow 501c3 organizations. With decades of experience in nonprofit strategy, entrepreneurship, and system design, Christian has helped thousands of founders turn their mission into tax-exempt organizations that create a real impact. His passion about removing the red tape so that change makers can focus on what truly matters, making the world a better place. Christian, I am looking forward to today's conversation. Thank you so much for being a guest.
Thanks, Keith. I'm
Let's
excited
start
to be
with
here.
your background. Yeah, let's start with your background if we could. You know, where did you grow up and what led you to this world of nonprofits?
Well, I grew up in North Jersey, and mostly with my mom and my little sister. My parents were divorced. My dad was an entrepreneur, and so I grew up, playing with my friends in Jersey, and just it was the 70s and 80s. You know, you spent time outside on your bicycle. Thank God we didn't have these distracting dopamine, devices. And
Exactly.
And I grew up, around some amazing people through my dad's shop. He was a Porsche mechanic, and he just was he was a genius with fixing high-end, high performance vehicles. So I was always around really neat sports cars. Always loved that stuff and wanted to have nice cars and learned to fix things, learned how things worked. So I always wonder what's inside. And so I remember I could recount, you could ask me any fact about any Porsche engine, and I knew exactly how it worked, and hydraulic chain tensioners and overhead cams and all that stuff. And, I think I grew up with a love of understanding how things work. And eventually that got me into a lot of different things, including nonprofits. I actually was in issue advocacy before I worked, and that's how I discovered the nonprofit sector. Is I worked for an issue advocacy organization that worked on basically, freedom and limited government. And it was really interesting. I got to fundraise all over the country, right? And I was amazed at the generosity of average Americans who wanted to keep our founding principles in place. And so I flew all over the country and met people in humble homes. You'd never know that they had millions socked away in a 401k or just, years and years of work or building a business. And what I would find is, as I was raising money for that particular cause, many of them wanted to look at what their legacy would be. And that's why they were giving to me, in fact, was to give to something that they knew would carry on after them and maybe preserve some of the principles that this nation was founded on. So that kind of opened up my eyes to the whole nonprofit world, the whole nonprofit sector. And when I rolled out of sort of working in the liberty movement and working for economic freedom and the market and all that stuff, I came upon how difficult it is to start a nonprofit. And once I looked under the hood there, I couldn't help but want to go in and fix that because it's really a challenge.
No, that's great. That's an interesting way to start, and I guess it just gave you that exposure enough for you to get curious about it and start to dig in. What are some of the, I guess, kind of, if you can explain to us, number one, what is considered to be a nonprofit? Why do people form one? And kind of maybe some of the biggest misconceptions or just unknowns about the process itself.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is, and this is true in many angles of life that you might look at, fish don't know the water they're swimming in. And one of the types of water we're all swimming in is that our entire society runs on nonprofits. The government dispenses most of its activities through nonprofits, whether it's social services, disaster relief, etc. Yes, these government agencies have gotten big and bloated, but they still do the majority of their work through nonprofits, right? These local organizations that we're all familiar with are just the tip of the iceberg. Salvation Army, United Way, Special Olympics, for example. My sister's developmentally disabled, and I grew up around Special Olympics. And so I kind of came up just believing, well, if somebody has a challenge, I guess the thing that people do is other people get around them and help create an awesome organization so they can have the greatest life they can have. And in fact, my little sister is now 52 years old and just came home with another gold medal from Special Olympics. She's actually passing 50 years in Special Olympics this week or right around this month. So I don't think people realize that 1 out of 11 jobs in the United States is through a nonprofit. Almost every hospital you can think of, all kinds of organizations in the community, et cetera. There's about $4 trillion, maybe close to 5 now, under management in the nonprofit sector. And nonprofits bring in, over $1 trillion a year in revenues. So really, really big sector, really big opportunity here, massive grants, all kinds of things. But what I wanted to talk to your audience about is the advantages of a nonprofit for legacy building and for keeping your family together, preserving wealth, avoiding some estate taxes, but still being able to control those assets. And if you think about it, most people build wealth personally, but the wealthy build ecosystems. They may not own all of their assets, but they control a lot of assets. And one of the ways they do that, and one of the ways they limit their taxation exposure, is by doing things like having a trust and a 501c3, right? And then these are great vehicles also to project one's values through the ages. We have AI coming along. We are looking at massive potential dislocation of the job market. And so what better way to help our family stay grounded in the things that we believe in, but building a family foundation, for example, and then having certain values projected through and inside that organization, right? That wealth store, so that it can go on and help other people, and then your family can be involved in something that's positive for the community, positive for them, and certainly keeps them involved in something that's really positive and values based.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot to be said there. And you're right. I mean, most of the time, once you've built to a certain level, you want something that's going to carry on. And what better way to instill, charity and giving to your children and your family than to have something like that you've organized? I mean, how it just seems like something that would be extremely cool to do. I've been looking forward to our conversation because my wife and I have talked about doing something ourselves, and we spend a lot of time helping family members. Now, I have researched and like trying to help somebody directly through it is a little bit, and you can get into the nuances, I guess, but you can't actually. There's certain obligations when it comes to trying to help an individual person through your nonprofit, and maybe there's some ways that you can still achieve that. But I'd love to kind of explore all that with you. So,
for sure, there are 4 different types of nonprofit, and everyone's familiar with the Eisenhower matrix, even if they don't know what it's called. The Eisenhower matrix has 2 axes, right? On one side, you have one measurement or one criteria, and on the bottom you have another criteria. And in this case, it's really easy to put it in your mind the four primary types of nonprofit. And the axes, right, for the criteria are: will it have programs, right? Will it help people directly, or will it just write grants to other organizations that help people, right? Because a 501c3, tax deductible money goes into a 501c3. And if it's a grant making organization, typically called a foundation, but that's kind of a loose term. Then if it's a grant making organization, it gives to other 501s and it doesn't run its own programs. But many nonprofits, like maybe the one you were thinking of, directly does help people. It has programs. Maybe it cleans up the beach, right? Or it provides equine therapy to people on the autism spectrum, right? Because animals are so healing and can really open people up to being more comfortable with operating in the world, whatever. So that's one type. Does it have its own programs, or is it just going to provide money to other organizations that run programs? On the bottom axis, you would look at, is it a single source of money, or is it a multiple sources of money, right? One is called a foundation, one is called a charity, and one is called particularly a private foundation. So I'll use some of these terms. Foundation is a little bit loose. You can call any nonprofit a foundation, but people often think of foundations when they either think of a private or family foundation or a grant-making foundation, right? And those can be two different things. And on the other end of that four-way matrix, you have a multiple source of revenue. And most often, that public charity, right? That's called a public charity if it gets many sources of revenue or more than 1/3 of its revenue from more than that one source. And the other end of the spectrum versus just one source is multiple sources. Like I said, more than 1/3 coming from what would be called general or public sources. That could be the government, that could be donors, etc. And so when you combine those two criteria, there are four different types of nonprofits, right? A private operating foundation or a private grant making foundation. Same thing with public. Many sources of revenue, runs programs. That's a typical public charity. And that's the vast majority of nonprofits out there. Public, so it raises money from many sources and it runs its own programs. And there are easy ways that if somebody wants to start something like you were talking about to help an individual, all you have to do is meet basic charitable criteria, right? What are charitable activities? If somebody's below the poverty line, right, or if they can't access healthcare, they can't access something that somebody might be considered a right or a basic human need, then that certainly qualifies as a charity. And obviously, these things need to benefit the public, not just somebody's individual, right, cause. But if you look at, there's a big gray area where a lot of people start GoFundMe accounts, for example, and people donate to those. But the IRS wants to know, is this income or is this charitable and tax exempt? Because if it's income, if you start a GoFundMe and you bring in $100,000, the government ever audits that, that's going to be taxable income to you. So you really do want to run these things through a nonprofit that exists or to start one yourself. And that's why we started Instant Nonprofit, is because we've taken all the friction out of starting and maintaining the nonprofit so people can just go out there, focus on their mission and do good. And so we've got the Instant Nonprofit as kind of the Toyota showroom, if you will, right? The most reliable vehicle to get from A to B, get that nonprofit started, make sure you don't miss any compliance regulations, take care of the paperwork and make it so easy for people to do that it doesn't get in the way of doing good in the world. And then we've also got Iconic Impact, which is a higher level brand where people come to us and they want they want a major foundation initiated, where they want to really accelerate their progress and have a major fundraising program put into place and a donation platform set up and a website and all of the things. And then we put them through a much more robust process through our brand called Iconic Impact. And that's, like I said, for people that are really establishing something and want to get it going quickly. We often do that, for example, for exiting entrepreneurs, right? People who are going to have a huge windfall and they want to put some of that stock into a nonprofit, right? And then catch the upside of that stock price through a charity. minimize their own taxation in the process, that's one way that they do that.
No, perfect. Okay. No, that's very, very interesting. And so, a single source, I guess, would be maybe just like if it's typically a family or somebody that
Mm-hmm.
has a certain amount of wealth and they want to, create a foundation. Maybe it's a family office or something of that nature that
Exactly.
creates. Yeah, but yeah, I think while there would be some type of a contribution from that standpoint, I think in most cases, well, I mean, it depends on the amount of wealth in that family office, but in a lot of cases, I think having the public or having the ability for people to donate just sort of expands the reach of the good that you can do. So.
It does. It does. Yeah. Typically, a foundation will be more of a wealth strategy or a family office strategy, right? Where there's just, a conglomeration of a conglomerate of companies that are producing, a lot of profit. And we want to have a family office and go out and do some good in the world, get involved in some of these global initiatives, et cetera. But one thing that is important to relay is that no matter what kind of nonprofit you start, maybe you start out with it being a public charity or you start out with it being a private foundation, you're not locked in, right? If you decide, hey, we want to expand our mission, we want to go out and get some other entrepreneurs like us who are exiting, or maybe, as your prospects and your Rolodex changes over the years and people say, boy, I'd like to participate in what you're doing, what you've built here. You can change horses in midstream with this, and it's just a process you go through.
Okay.
A lot of people start a public charity, and then there's called the 5-year test at the IRS. You can start a public charity, and then if you don't raise more than 1/3 of your capital, your revenues, if you don't raise more than 1/3 in within that 5 years through other sources, then you just automatically default to becoming a private foundation. No harm, no foul. And there's an easy process to do that.
Okay. And that's you said a 5-year window on that?
Yeah, they'll typically look at the 990, which is the tax return. They don't call it a tax return. They call it an information return because it's technically not taxable at the corporate level. But after 5 years of filing 990s, if you're not raising money from other sources, it'll default to a private foundation. And there are some minimal but pretty reasonable restrictions or requirements on a private foundation that don't exist with a public charity. But that's really what we're here to do, is make all of that stuff easy so that somebody can really, like I said, focus on their mission, whether that's a wealth strategy or, and obviously even as a wealth strategy, private foundations are in the business of doing good in the world. So there is 5% requirement to expend its capital at 5% per year at least, even if it's reinvesting some of its wealth into growth stocks or growth methods to grow the endowment, grow the amount of money in there. That's perfectly fine. But either way, the main thing that we do is help people focus on the mission of the nonprofit and not on all the paperwork and complications. And just like with anything, when you start a nonprofit, as with any business, you want to keep that noise, right, of the complication and the compliance and all of that stuff. You want to keep the amount of time and bandwidth that you spend on that commensurate with where that business is at, right? When you're just getting started, you don't need to worry about every possible eventuality. You just want to make sure you're compliant with those basic rules at the beginning. And that's why we kind of mete out the strategies appropriate to where the organization is, right? Both in income and in just general complexity and regulations. For example, below $50,000, the tax filing, right? That annual, what would replace the 1120 corporate tax filing, is extremely simple, right? We handle that for people. Once you graduate above $50,000, throw a little party, and then you get on about the business of going up to $200,000, and that's a 990 EZ. That's the easiest version of the tax return for a nonprofit that's bringing in a reasonable amount of money. North of 200, you go to a full 990, and I guess the form number doesn't matter as much as that's just an example of how the IRS understands that this can be a complicated endeavor. And so we don't want to make it more complicated than it needs to be for the level at which the organization is operating.
Okay. And so let's say you're starting out with under 50,000. This is the first year of the organization and the nonprofit, and obviously, you would hope that it would grow over time. But on that initial one, from a tax standpoint, is this something that typical CPAs understand and can take care of? Is this filed separately from, say, your personal return and handled by somebody totally different that has some type of expertise in this type of filing, or is it pretty simple? I guess let us know a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a distinct, EIN, bank account, decision-making process. That should all be independent. Now, what a lot of our customers start a nonprofit alongside of their for-profit. And sometimes that nonprofit might even have something that's adjacent to or relevant to the business that they're operating in. For example, if you had Keith Boree Roofing, you might have a Habitat for Humanity type nonprofit that goes out and does, widows and orphans roof repair, right, for free in the community, and it engages your team. Studies show that employee retention goes through the roof if you can attach the employees that your team members to a meaningful project in the community. They love that, right? And so Gallup and all these studies have shown, especially with young people, it's not just about the level of paycheck. It's easier to keep someone around with a meaningful nonprofit project through your company than it is with a raise through your company at a certain point, because people are looking for meaning in this world, right? A lot of the institutions that we've always attached our identity to in this world and in this country are less meaningful to people, right? They're wondering, well, what's it mean to be a good citizen? What's it mean to be connected in this world, connected to each other and in community? And so providing a means for these connection points is really valuable in many ways, including in some business ways. And so if you were to have Keith Boree Roofing and this Keith Boree Roofing, foundation to go out and help folks that maybe need some help and can't afford it to keep their heads dry, you can do that through that nonprofit. And what's neat about that is, since the name, right, and your presence in the community at these events, or maybe a small gala or a silent auction, is only reinforcing, right, and putting a halo on your for-profit business. And that's perfectly fine. It's okay to do well while doing good, because people are really looking nowadays for signals as to whether you as a business owner, or you as a source of a resource who's built up some wealth in the community, are you playing the role of a good citizen? Are you playing the role of somebody who cares about the community and really is living in an ecosystem instead of, there can be a lot of maligning now of even capitalism itself, right? And so it's great to have a way to convey to people, signal to people, hey, I care about the community. I've done well here, and I want to make sure that I'm, engaged and showing the appreciation, just showing your heart to be able to help other people. And then that becomes something that can benefit the business as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, and I think it makes total sense for a business that's successful to be able to do those kind of things. The roofing example was a really good one. WealthFlow audience, pardon me for a quick interruption to today's show, but I have some exciting news that I want to be sure that all of our listeners are aware of. We just launched 3 totally unique to the market funds that are at the cutting edge of technology and AI. We have combined my 25 years of real estate experience and my recent work as VP of development for a tech company to bring 3 awesome investment options to our audience. For full details, go to our website at bobocapitalventures.com. Again, that is BOBO capitalventures.com. All right, back to the show. What about on the roofing example, for instance? Obviously, it'd be great to anticipate and hope that the employees will volunteer their time, for instance. But are there, if the business owner, I would imagine, even if the workers are getting compensated and paid for their contribution, as long as the business owner is the one that's paying for that as a donation or paying for it through the foundation, then it would still be all tax deductible as far as the amount that's being sourced for that roof repair.
It would, and I'm so glad you brought up that distinction if I didn't make it clear, because, when we write a conflict of interest policy for a nonprofit, which is required for every nonprofit, just like any document, right? This can feel really confusing when you first take a look at it. And we try to do things in plain language without, walls of massive paragraphs of all capitals like the attorneys love to do. But ultimately, the conflict of interest policy says that you won't pay any more than market value for compensation for someone or for a product or service, right? Otherwise, it could be seen as like unduly enriching, using the nonprofit to unduly enrich, your brother-in-law for buying those shingles at, you don't want to pay more than market. As a matter of fact, of course, most things are at a discount. People donate their time at maybe a little bit of a discount to what they would normally charge, et cetera. But all you have to do is keep a basic record of the time and the value of those services that you're providing to the community. And that does, in fact, become a write-off, whether it's a direct cash infusion to the foundation and then the foundation pays an invoice, even back to the roofing company. That would be fine. Or it can just be provided in what's called an in-kind donation. An in-kind donation is one where cash isn't being transacted, but something of value is being given. That could be materials. That could be the time of the workers. Or if the workers do volunteer, right? Now, I think it's great what you mentioned. If someone can pay, 5 hours a week per employee, right? They get half a day at the end of the day on Fridays or on Saturdays, where they pay that person for half a day to just go out and they get a list of the people who need the service and they go dispense the service. That works. Some companies and organizations do it through materials, right? They donate excess materials. You're done with some roofs. You've got some really high quality shingles and roof repair materials. You can donate those, and then those get used, and that helps the environment and also helps the organization use those materials effectively. And they can get a write-off for the value of those materials. So there's a lot of different ways that you can orchestrate that. And there's as many ways for a nonprofit to bring money in as there are ways to do business in any business. Some nonprofits, I'll give you an example of a marriage, maybe a marriage organization that's like helping keep marriages together. Maybe they have seminars at churches and community centers. They might charge a fee for service, right? So you pay $48 for that weekend with your spouse. That's a great way that some nonprofits bring in all their money through those kinds of transactions. There are many therapy offices that we've started or we've converted over to a nonprofit. They're not getting taxed at the corporate level, which is great, right? They have some money left at the end of the year and they want to sock that away to buy a building. That's not taxable in a nonprofit, but they still pay all of the therapists and they do a sliding scale. And so when people come in, they do fee for service. They pay what they can afford according to a sliding scale, and an underserved community gets that therapy. Meanwhile, the therapist, everybody gets paid, and it just operates just like any other business.
Yeah, that's really, really pretty interesting. So to start something like this, I know you said that you guys have kind of two different ways that you help folks. How involved is it to get that initial one started? If you are just looking at, more of the baseline, hey, this is something, Christian, that has caught my attention. I'm interested in doing this. What does it look like to start one up, and what kind of expenses would one need to anticipate in just the formation piece of it?
Just to give round numbers, it's about $1,000 to $2,000 to start a 501c3 with us.
Okay.
And then there are some government fees involved, which typically are around 1/3 of the cost of the services, right? So if you are a very small nonprofit and you don't expect to bring very much in, or you're just not sure, there's a more streamlined path, and that's just about $1,000, just under. And then the government filing fees vary by state because of the cost of incorporation per state, but they approximate $350, right? So about another third of $1,000. If you're going to start a foundation, or you're going to start a more robust organization that's going to bring in above $50,000, that first small package was called the Express launch package with Instant Nonprofit. If you're going to go with the enterprise or the private foundation package, that's $1,500 to $2,000 and about $700 in government fees on average. And that is absolutely everything. Unlike many or most of the companies that purport to start nonprofits for people, we don't, incorporate you and then hand you a government form. And we haven't just translated whatever language that is that the IRS speaks. Sometimes it feels like they're from Mars. We translate everything into English. We make it so easy for someone to go through this that our average customer spends less than 30 minutes in the entire process of starting the nonprofit. We take everything off their back from there, push that through. We give a ton of training. We give a whole raft of documents in neatly organized cloud folders. And just like with many business exercises, you started your own business. I'm sure many of your listeners have as well. There are some things that you just kind of put in a file and you never look at again. And there are some documents that you kind of need to pay attention to. And so we kind of tell you one from the other exactly how to run a board meeting, for example. Not everybody is used, nobody wants to go out and buy Robert's Rules of Order and leaf through a 1,000-page manual on how to pound a gavel. We just make it an easy 30 minutes or less board meeting process, as opposed to the average 3-hour board meeting in the nonprofit world, so that people can just get in there, understand what they need to think about, what they need to approve and ratify, and then vote and get out of there and go on about their business. Again, this is about making these organizations effective and not just getting mired down in bureaucracy. This whole industry has been started and maintained for decades by attorneys and accountants. And boy, they have their place, and they certainly have their expertise when needed, but they're not exactly adept at guiding you through this complex, navigating this process in a way that takes all the work off your back. And that's literally all we do. So all of those things are included. You're never left wondering where you are. We contextualize every step of the process. And then we get very, very fast approvals from the IRS, because we also do their job for them. When that IRS agent opens our package, they've never seen such a thing of beauty, and they know that they're going to be able to punch out to lunch a little early that day with one less file on their desk, which is what every bureaucrat really wants to do.
Right. Good point. How about state to form the entity in? Is there a particular state that you typically recommend, or is it just, hey, whatever state you currently are either have your business in, or what any suggestions there?
No, that's a great question, because of course Delaware and Nevada come up for for-profit corporations, and the reason for that typically is they have very protective laws in those states, where it's very hard to do what's called pierce that corporate veil, divulge through a frivolous lawsuit, for example, divulge the board minutes, right? Divulge the secrets of the organization, the private effects of the organization, the company. And so that's traditionally why people go to Delaware, Nevada, or nowadays Wyoming has really great privacy protections, and Wyoming's an LLC haven now because of it. And in the nonprofit sector, because this is a little bit more of a public type of organization, not everything is public, but much more about the organization is public. Those advantages to a for-profit really don't come into play so much. Now, there are a couple of states I would say to avoid. If you can avoid Hawaii and Washington State, and as you know, if you tilt the United States in one direction, the direction that the marbles are going to go in, if you tilt it West Coast down, is probably going to be more regulated, right? You have a little bit more regulations in California, Oregon, Washington, Hawaii, and they just tend to be more highly regulated states for business anyway. Well, and it's true of New York traditionally as well. But in most cases, even California, relatively simple to start a nonprofit, relatively simple to maintain. It's just like Washington and Hawaii have really gone a little bit overboard with regulation. So if you have a choice, I would just avoid those two states. In most other cases, I would say go with your home state, go with a place where you've already got a business presence, you've got a footprint, you've got a mailbox, or you've got a home of a board member or home for yourself to be able to receive mail, and just make that a little bit less complicated than having a registered agent or something.
Yeah. And you brought something up, which I guess I just didn't think of. I just thought of money coming into this and immediately going out. But you mentioned endowment, and you mentioned the ability to invest this money. And, obviously you've got to at least put out, I think you said 5%. And I think most would probably do more than that. But to keep some back where it's continually growing and investing, and expanding, I think is, just helps with the life of that organization as well. Are there specific or any restrictions on what type of investments those funds can go into? Do they have to be mutual funds or, index funds, or, is there something that limits, the specific investment?
There are some limitations, and while I'm not a tax attorney, I do understand the major limitations are that because I've worked with people that want to maybe direct some of this money that they're putting into a startup, right? It's a little difficult to do that because that's not a liquid investment, and it can be seen as highly speculative and risky. And usually if somebody wants to do that, it's their cousins, right? Or somebody that they have an interest in. And so that smacks of, self-dealing or something, and just can't be done, right? So it has to be a relatively liquid investment. There is some latitude in how that's looked at. So I don't believe that there are many restrictions on the type of investment, stocks, insurance, et cetera, et cetera. There are various, or hard assets. Some nonprofits, have invested in hard assets, or some nonprofits have gone into crypto, et cetera. And like I said, while I'm not a tax attorney, mainly the ones that people want to do that are not something that can be done is like funding a startup, or funding something that's very, very early stage, very speculative.
Yeah, it makes sense. Or if you have a fund, probably not taking money that would be contributed to a nonprofit that you have and then putting it into an investment fund that you have. I would think there'd be some kind of a conflict of interest there, even if that it's gonna grow fun, grow money from it. But and go ahead, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I was just going to offer that when you are considering, like, say somebody's getting a windfall, right? They're getting an inheritance and they want to put some of that into a nonprofit. A huge advantage is being able to put stock into a nonprofit that has massively appreciated. You get the write-off of the appreciation, but you only paid the tax at the lower tax basis. So if you bought Tesla stock when it was $100 and now it's $1,000, you're going to, if you give that stock to the nonprofit, you're going to get the $1,000 per share write-off. But at the beginning, you only paid tax on the way in, right? And even if you take it now, you only get taxed on the cost, on the price at which you bought it. So you get this great write-off and not much of there's not much tax exposure, because you would pay the tax that was based on the price of the stock at which time you bought it. That's a huge incentive. It's great for nonprofits, and it's also great for the taxpayer, the donor.
Yeah, for sure. No, sounds like it. And that's pretty common, isn't it? I mean, it's probably not as common as just a normal cash, but I mean, to have to assign stocks and, various things to a nonprofit is something that's definitely done out there.
Yeah, I mean, like Donald Trump or hate him, when that moment came in that debate and he said, I'm just following the tax code as it was written. And in fact, it had been in part written by people on the stage during that debate. That was really one of those moments that you're just happy somebody said something that is obvious, right? You can't, you got to work within the system that we're in. And in fact, there's probably been a ton of good done by having that policy because it incents people to give to nonprofits. And nonprofits are inherently more efficient at helping people than government. I think we've been able to see over the years. And this is why I'm a huge advocate. Let's keep this society voluntary. Let's not make it so that they want to come with picks and shovels and
taxes,
Molotov cocktails for the people that have the money by keeping a robust, voluntary flow of capital into these organizations that are innovating these incredible ways to help people. And that they're always going to be more efficient, more effective than government. And what if we solved some of the problems that government can't seem to solve? Well, that would take away a lot of the reason for tax increases or regulation increases and stuff, right? If we roll up our sleeves and continue to solve problems through innovation and through ingenuity and all the great things that make this country wonderful.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. That's great. How about as far as just on the so once you initially get this set up, you mentioned kind of documenting the board meeting, and the things that you'll need for the hours for the incorporation. But what about any other milestones throughout the year that you have to be aware of and kind of keep on the radar? Or is it just mainly annual filing?
So it's mostly annual filing. Small organizations can keep to a board meeting every year, and that keeps it really simple, right? That's a minimal, brain damage, as I call it, a minimal hassle to just have a board meeting every year. But when an organization starts getting bigger, it starts making more grants or having more programs out in the field. The board meeting becomes, instead of just a perfunctory requirement, it becomes a really good feedback loop for the organization to make sure it's keeping on track, executing its mission well, being efficient with its money, et cetera. So most of those requirements are adjustable and they're not imposed from outside, right? Now, if you're running payroll, whether you're W-2 or 1099 is just like any other business for the most part, right? You either have monthly or quarterly tax reports due and tax impoundments and stuff. That's very similar to a normal business cycle. And most of the taxes and regulations outside of that, like filing an annual tax return, et cetera, are annual, just like with any business. But of course, the easy answer for me is to say, if you want to start an organization like this, get in touch with our team and we can walk you through things based on your situation. In fact, we have a little quiz right on our company website where people just answer 2 or 3 questions and it lets them know which of these packages are right for them based on some very, very simple questions. And we don't have a phone center overseas with, generic people or AI robots answering the phone, at least yet. We have real domain experts at this company who we only do this. And this is something where we really want to understand what's on people's hearts, what's of interest for them, whether they want to keep their family legacy alive and their values alive while they're here and when they're gone, where they want to serve a mission out in the field and just bring relief to people or animals or help the environment in some way. We want to hear about that. And then we can tailor a program that fits them, whether they just want to start a bare bones nonprofit and have us just keep those minimal requirements in place so they don't lose good standing, they don't lose the corporation, don't lose tax-exempt status, which breaks our heart when that happens. That's why we have our nonprofit autopilot program. Or if they want to start something big, and we are working with wealth managers now who help entrepreneurs exit and not be taxed or strategize to not be taxed unnecessarily and to just be wise with how they structure maybe their Roth and their other there are other ways of managing that asset. And in those cases, we'll step in and really help build something that will be of institutional level and help that person navigate all of these complexities of starting, but also of growing, of organizing, of keeping those calendar dates together. We manage all of that stuff so that somebody, again, can go out and maybe They're going to start a whole new phase of their life, go out and speak and engage with people of great gravity in different areas of the world and really make an impact. Because so many people that are coming out of industry or entrepreneurship have so much more to give after their exit. Their exit might be at 40, 50, 60. They've got decades to go. They can bring all that wisdom and that capital and their ability to get people behind an organization, behind a mission. That is of paramount value in this world, especially as we face so much change today.
Yeah, for sure. No, this has been really, really good. I appreciate you sharing how to do it, and it's great to hear that you kind of have an easy button for being able to, number one, set it up, but also to maintain it, which I think is something that sometimes sometimes it's easy to, for a lot of us that have started different things and filed for various things. It's like you get it, that's great, you check the first box, but then it's the upkeep and the ongoing, stuff that sometimes trips people up. So it's great that you guys do that. How can people find out more about you, Christian, more about your organization, and if they, if we pique their interest on the podcast, what would be the best way to get in touch with you?
Absolutely. They can go to instantnonprofit.com, and there's a button to book a call right on that page. And for people who are starting more of an institutional organization, want to check that out, they can go to iconikimpact.ai. And either way, I just wanted to tell a really quick story on the way off here, if you don't mind. And of course, we're on all the socials. You can follow us on social. We'll certainly be posting clips from this episode, and sharing it, getting the word out there. But one of the projects that we did that really brought this thing home to me, and I live this mission every day, but sometimes you're just head down, you're grinding, you're building a company, building a business, serving people, and there's that one case that just you never forget. And I worked with a lady on one of these big legacy projects, and her dad was getting older, and he was kind of an institution in the community, pillar of the community, and she's like, my dad, I discovered in eliciting her story, her hero's journey, which we use that Joseph Campbell model all the time, right? We're all on a hero's journey in this life. And she shared that her dad is really the one who encouraged her, to be engineer when women weren't becoming engineers. And then with her engineer mind, seeing a path to having a much cleaner environment and you working with industry instead of against it to achieve that. And, she started sharing, and I was eliciting her story. Her dad became really central to this whole sort of hero's journey and awakening to this cause. And we ended up drafting, for her and with her, a really like heart-centered, very caring, and very sensitive, accurate depiction of her relationship with her dad and how he encouraged her to do these things that weren't accepted for women back then. And how he took her to the beach, cared about the environment, and really instilled all these values in her. And when this thing came out and we sent this out to her brand new nonprofit list as an email, she said people stopped her in the street and thanked her for writing such a beautiful piece to honor her dad. And that really struck them, and that she just really got so much positive feedback. And she got on a call with me and said, I just haven't, and I probably won't share with my dad that, I wasn't the sole writer of this email, right? I wasn't, that this was something that was sort of a project. And she really thanked me for capturing that relationship in that way. And that's really what this stuff all comes back to is, right? We grow up and we go into business and we have dreams and all that stuff. And there are some dreams that we put on the side because we need to have our family and take care of them and make a living and all that stuff. And so I think everyone has a little dream on the side that they've been waiting to put forward until they have the money and the time and all of that stuff and accomplish some other things. And that email really captured what was behind that dream for this person. And that's something that I would just love to do for other people. And it really, when I think about what's brought me the most joy in doing what I do, it's that email and that sort of spirit.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, that's. I mean, you can tell in even your passion in telling the story. But yeah, I mean, it's all about making that impact, and that definitely is the feel good piece of it. And I think for a lot of folks that are out there, a lot of folks that are charitable, that are giving, oftentimes we give to things kind of by default. I know specifically with me, nothing wrong with giving to the church, but I give to the church, and half the time I don't get to see the
Hmm.
benefit and what's happening out there. I assume and know, that it's going in a good spot, but you don't really see that impact. And so I think this can be a way for people to have a bigger impact and really be able to personalize it and witness it up front and really see those kind of stories that you just described. So that's awesome.
Definitely, definitely. We are meaning making machines,
Yep, exactly. All right. Well, I've got a couple other questions for you that I ask every guest. One is just any advice, and maybe we could put a different spin on it for this particular conversation. But typically, what I ask is just any advice you would give somebody who's maybe just starting out in their investment journey. Maybe it's just starting out in their charity journey. In this
Hmm.
case,
You know, we often look at things in a sort of analytical, mathematical way. I think, in the West, we've almost painted ourselves into a corner by doing that, right? And we've lost a little bit of community, lost a little bit of a sense of our sort of spiritual and divine selves. So I always advise people to try to come up with a Venn diagram where you're covering the bases of, yes, you want something to be used efficiently. You want it to make sense from the sort of accounting, putting the accountant's glasses on, and does this organization use their gifts wisely? Or do they have low, people are concerned about low overhead, although that's kind of a debatable topic, et cetera. But you want it to make sense from the math perspective, but don't lose the heart. There are so many opportunities where you can give to an organization, but also have more of a connection, whether that's just they do better reporting. And that reporting is going to allow you, like you mentioned, to see and feel the effect of your giving. And also to give to something that maybe you've got a little bit of experience with, right? Where have you experienced pain in your own life? Where have you experienced, whether it was when you were younger or maybe you went through a tragic situation or somebody in your family did? How can you give to something that's actually going to have some meaning to you viscerally and personally?
yeah, no, I think that's great advice. All right, last question I've got for you, Christian, and then I think we'll call it a show. How about a book recommendation? Does not have to be charity related or investment related, but just something that you've read that's been impactful.
Yeah, I'm looking up the author because it's slipping my mind, but the book Anti-Fragile: The Things That Gain from Disorder is the most important book, I believe, of our time. It's about it's about systems. The core tenet of the book Anti-Fragile is to recognize and even build in our lives and our businesses systems that actually gain strength and gain integrity from injury, from challenges, from stress. And this doesn't mean hardening them and making them more brittle or mitigating these effects that these stresses have, but actually, what are ways to create systems in our lives and our businesses and everything we do and think about, and even in our way of thinking, where the stress coming in, for example, from this job market dislocation that's coming in, or whatever, from AI, whatever it is, how can you create systems and ways of thinking that actually create something stronger from stress? And I'll just give you a really quick example of just, an everyday example of that. Um, I recently had a mechanical problem with my vehicle, and I've adopted a way of thinking: how can I turn every situation I run into something that makes me stronger? And while I think it's silly sometimes, the idea that what kills you doesn't make you stronger, because sometimes it just simply almost kills you. But in this case, I had my running shoes in the back of my truck, and I was able to run farther than I had run in a really, really long time because I had this car problem. I got home. I certainly got the vehicle towed and everything. But if I can take every challenge that comes along like that and go, how can I use this to my advantage to be able to think nimbly and not be affected mentally and let this wear me down, but actually bring me strength, bring me, in this case, more physical fitness. That's a basic example, but there are systems that they go over in this book where we can create ways to become more integrally whole, right? And just systems that become stronger based on the hormetic stress, for example, right? Where that's what vaccines do essentially, or inoculations, right? They give you a little bit of a challenge, and then your body is able to overcome that in the future. And that's the general idea. And with the amount of change that we're experiencing with AI, politically, geopolitically, all of these things, this is the book I'm recommending. Couldn't think of a better one.
No, I love it. Anti-Fragile. Okay, perfect. Well, Christian, this has been awesome. Really appreciate you being on the Wealth Flow, and I think we'll call it a show.
Absolutely. Thank you, Keith.
All right. If you're still here, I assume that you found value in today's show and with the guests we interviewed. Please take a minute to subscribe and to review the show. It really helps. Also, wanted to remind you to check out Bobo Capital Ventures to get the first look at our 3 new cutting-edge, first-to-the-market investment opportunities. We have only about 15 spots for each fund for retail investors, and we would love more than anything else to have our audience be part of that group of limited partner investors. Thanks for listening to The Wealth Flow, and have a great day.
Being that you're still here, I trust you found value in this episode. I personally wish I would have known these guests and strategies when I started my wealth creation journey. Go to wealthflow.capital to subscribe to our newsletter. And as a free gift, we will send you our quarterly market report and the top 10 things to look for in an investment opportunity. Take a minute to give our show a rating and review. Help us reach 1 million professionals by subscribing and sharing this episode with someone you know who could also find value in it.